All right, guys, let's talk Penguin episode 7. I can't believe it. It's already coming to an end. I know we just wrapped up Agatha, but to think that now Penguin is going to be coming to a close pretty soon, actually next week, which it's just crazy. But, we'll have more TV to talk about. We have Dune Prophecy, Creature Commandos, and Skeleton Crew coming up. So lots of great, hopefully great, at least, television to talk about. I'm sure Dune Prophecy will be great. Have high hopes for Skeleton Crew, and we'll see about Creature Commandos. So lots to talk about. But we're here to talk about The Penguin. So this is a full spoiler discussion of episode 7 of The Penguin. If you have not seen the episode yet, just save this segment, save the podcast to watch later, and come back to it once you have already, so we don't get anything spoiled for you there. So let's talk about episode 7 of The Penguin. This show has just been firing on all cylinders. I still think, I said this in my immediate reaction, I posted that as soon as the episode came out, and this is now more of a deep dive into the episode, and kind of preparing us for the finale here. But, I said that I think the show peaked a little bit, honestly, with episodes 3 and 4, but that's not to say that these other episodes, 1, 2, 5, 6, 7 have not been great. I mean, it just goes to show you. I think episodes 3 and episode 4, and that was the Vic episode and the Sofia Falcone episode, were probably some of the greatest episodes of television I've ever seen, honestly. And so just to, to say that the show peaked there is no insult to the show at all. I mean, the show has been amazing thus far. And I just think that, the rest of the show kind of, I think by nature is building towards something, so it just feels a little bit more linear. Obviously, this episode was much more Oz-centric. We got a lot more actually, of his backstory, which I was asking about a couple episodes ago. I was wondering whether or not we'd see more about his brothers, and we do get to see more of his brothers here. But yeah, I mean, I think that, I think just because we had a Vic episode and then we had a Sophia episode, those episodes feel like they stand out more to me. But this show has just been awesome, right? This show has just been amazing thus far. And I think we're headed for an explosive finale. We'll ask the question, the B question at the end, and we'll talk about whether or not we think Batman will show up in the finale. I have my thoughts, but we'll get to that towards the end. So as always, I'll do a little bit of a play-by-play here as we go and run through this episode and kind of talk through what I was thinking throughout the whole thing. So as we start out, we start out with the music, right? And immediately I was like, oh, okay, so, we left off episode 6 with Sophia kind of standing over Vic and Francis, Francis Cobb. And so I thought, okay, we're going to pick up right away here. But it turns out this is a flashback. And the second this was a flashback, I knew, okay, we're going to actually get some backstory here between Penguin and I believe Jack and Benny, I believe are his siblings' names, his brothers' names. We're going to get some more backstory with them there. So we get to see the dynamic, right? We still don't see the father. And, I'm sure that, well, if they do a Penguin season 2, I'm sure that'll be explored at some point. I don't know if in this season, in episode 8, they're going to reveal who the father is. Maybe it's not important. It might not be important. But we see the mom, we see Francis, and then we see the 3 siblings here. And you can already tell there's a lot of tension going on here, especially from Oz's point of view. You can tell that he has this sort of a distant dislike of his brothers, and then he wants to be super close, uncomfortably close to his mother. But he doesn't, he doesn't let that hatred show, at least towards the very beginning here. So then we see the brothers heading out, and they go and meet Rex, who is that gangster, I think, that Penguin kept talking about throughout the beginning, or the brunt of this series, and the one that he really respected and really liked. And then we see them playing tag, and it's really cruel because I think the brothers, right? We see the brothers really taking advantage of the fact that Oz is just not physically as capable as the rest of them, which I think he really resents from them, honestly. And that's just, it's really sad. It's a really sad thing to see. But then obviously that doesn't warrant what happens next, because this show continuously does this. And it's so amazing how it's able to just subvert expectations, because you're like, oh, he's going to be upset at his brothers or whatever. And then he just straight up murders his brothers. And, it's this interesting thing, right? Because, I mean, it is one thing to say, sure, Oz definitely had a lot of trauma, a lot of trauma as a kid, for sure. But on the other hand, it's almost even more heartbreaking to see these murderous instincts coming out when he's just a child. It's like, man, just the wrong combination of things here that created this person that is now Oz Cobb that we're following as Colin Farrell. And by the way, Colin Farrell, every single episode, more and more and more, give him an Emmy. I know we don't even know what the rest of the nominees would be, but just, oh my gosh, just give him an Emmy. Kristen Milioti as well. But I think Oz is really starting to take more of a front seat here in the show. I think Sophia had a lot more screen focus and screen presence in episode maybe 3, 4, 5-ish, but this is Oz's show now, and man, it's just crazy, the things that he does. So this kid, he had this murderous instinct in him basically the whole time, and that's that's terrifying. My stomach was kind of turning, honestly, after seeing Oz just kill his brothers like that. That's crazy. And he doesn't, we see then the next scenes where he's watching the movie with his mom, and he just doesn't feel bad about it either, which is so terrifying. It's just a show about a bunch of cold-blooded people, and it's kind of a race to the bottom is what I said in my immediate reaction, and I kind of stand by that. It's just, who can be the least bad, and they're all bad. I mean, they're all bad. It's really just who can come out on top, but also kind of a race to the bottom, if that makes sense. So now we have Frances, and she's in the Falcone home. We're in present day now, and I mean, she's just kind of roasting everybody here. She's very lucid, which is kind of interesting here. And then she just digs into Sofia Falcone as well, or Sofia Gigante, I should say. And, that was kind of terrifying to watch. I was saying this, it's like the two most terrifying female characters I've seen in a TV show in a long time, just going back and forth at each other in this room in this kind of game of cat and mouse and manipulations and roasts and digs and all. It was really kind of scary and fascinating to watch here. And then she kind of loses her lucidity at just the wrong moment, and that's when we bring in that Dr. Rush, who seems like there were some theories going around that maybe he's not a real person. He seems very real. I don't know, maybe even Frances is hallucinating him now. Seems pretty real, but yeah, she loses it at the wrong moment. And then she gets it back and she slaps Sofia, which was crazy, just a crazy move. So anyways, Dr. Julian Rush goes to Sofia and he's like, hey, remember that little girl you killed her parents, that, killed their entire family, but killed these girls' parents? Yeah, she's not doing well. Understandably, she's not doing well. And so then, we revisit this later on where Sofia goes to meet Gia is her name. And I think that was kind of a powerful moment that we'll talk about in just a second here. But anyways, now we have Sal, who comes and finds Penguin. So we don't see Vic in this episode, which is interesting. Vic kind of disappears, but we see Sal coming in for Penguin, and he's just going at him. He's letting out all of his anger for killing his family. And Penguin is still doing Penguin things, like provoking Sal for that. And so then there's this whole fight that happens in the facility where basically Sal is like, this is my operation now. And Penguin's like, yep. And then he starts a fight. And we have a one-on-one between Oz and Sal. And it looks like it's interesting. I need to rewatch this scene maybe to kind of figure out exactly what's going on here. Because it feels like, so Sal doesn't die by a stab wound or a gun wound or anything like that. He just kind of dies. I don't know if it was a heart attack or some kind of failure in his body or something like that, but kind of just doubles over and he dies. And on the one hand, at first, actually, I kind of thought Oz was disappointed almost. I thought that the dialogue and the reaction that Oz gave was almost insinuating that he was like, wait a second, that's lame. I wanted to kill you. What happened there? But then it seems like he kind of gets on board with it. And he's like, yeah, well, I beat you. And so then he seems happier with it. I need to, again, rewatch this scene to just kind of figure out because there's a complexity of reactions that are going on here from Oz, which is, again, huge credit to Colin Farrell. He's just amazing. So yeah, a lot of complex emotions going on here. But Penguin, he seems upset, but then also he doesn't seem upset. And then he's like, yeah, I beat you, Sal, which is, it's so interesting that it's always coming back to this idea of winning and being on top. And I beat you, Sal, which is such an interesting thing here. So, and now there's only one thing remaining right at this point. Now that Sal Maroni is dead, it is really just take down Sofia Gigante. So then we have this other, kind of subplot going on here where Sofia goes to meet Gia, and she completely ruined her life, and now she's entering this room, and it's crazy because, at this point I'm like, Sofia, you're just being a terrible, terrible person. I mean, you literally killed this girl's parents, and now you're like, well, you don't be so upset about it. They were bad people. And I'm like, that's awful. That's just terrible. And then she kind of turns around, right? And has this speech here where she's like, you deserve better, go be and do something better. And then you see some genuine emotion out of her where it's almost like she starts feeling some kind of remorse here. And, I said this in my immediate reaction, but it was like, yeah, nobody in the show is a good person, but then you have these glimmers of genuine emotion that come out of them. And the conversation with Gia is just, it's so hard to watch, but then you just see this kind of remorse come out of her. And she has this honest moment with Dr. Julian later where she's like, I just want to be free. And so at that point I was like, oh, interesting. Maybe Sofia, because, the showrunners, I believe, and the writers had said earlier, like, it's called the Penguin, but the Penguin is probably, I'm not gonna say the antagonist, but it's sort of the opposition force, and maybe you should be rooting for Sofia. And I was like, interesting, because so far Sofia is also a terrible person. But then I was like, are they positioning her to kind of make a turn, to take down Oz's empire and come out on top as sort of this morally ambiguous person? And then she immediately goes into, I want Oz to suffer like I suffered. And I'm like, oh, okay, we're right back to it. So again, show is showing lot of complex emotions and a lot of complex motivations here all bundled up, and it's just not easy to characterize these people and say I want to root for, this is the hero, this is the villain, whatever. I mean, you thought a character like Batman in the Batman was complicated. No, these characters are so complicated. Again, not to excuse anything that they've done horrible, heinous, atrocious things, all of these characters, even Vic, which is really sad for me to say. But yeah, this is again a show about just a lot of terrible things happening to people, and happening from people who you could call terrible, but then also show really interesting glimmers of emotion here. So then Oz is like, hey, I killed Sal. I just want my mom. And it's a trap. We all know this is a trap. So I was like, okay, so what is Sophia going to do? Because Sophia seems like she's going along with it. And I'm like, how can you believe him again? How could you believe him again, right? Because he's betrayed you so many times before. But then there's this whole thing now where the car goes in. And the second the car didn't immediately reveal who was driving it, I was like, Sophia's not in that car. I knew immediately she wasn't in that car. Now, my suspicion was, I actually did think, I kind of knew. So the first thing, I knew that she wasn't in the car. I also had a sneaking suspicion. It's a Trojan horse situation. It's classic, right? I mean, it goes all the way back to Greek literature, the Trojan horse, right? In the Iliad, I believe. And, you bring the car in, and I knew that there was going to be a bomb in the car. I just knew it. I also actually kind of thought that she would put Francis's dead body in the car, which is maybe really morbid of me to say. But that's kind of where I thought this was going, and it turns out that she's just... I guess she needs Francis alive because we see Francis at the end of this episode. And so yeah, I kind of predicted 2 out of the 3 things that would happen, but I thought a third thing would happen. And I guess they're saving some kind of confrontation here with Francis in the final episode. And I'm curious to see also, like I mentioned, that Vic didn't show up in this episode. And I'm curious to see where he shows up at the end of this show and kind of what his final place is in this whole show, because I'm interested in the fact that Vic really wasn't a big part of this episode. This episode was also a bit shorter. Am I wrong about that? I feel like because this episode ended and it was like, like 45 minutes, which is fine. It's a good length for an episode. It felt long and substantial, but I feel like other episodes were 55 minutes, maybe an hour long. So interested in that. But then, the one final thing, because the show always has those moments where you're like, oh my gosh, like really, that's crazy. And it's that Oz hides in the same place. He runs from the bomb and hides in the same place where he killed his brothers. And that's crazy. It's just crazy. And then the episode ends and there's going to be this confrontation now with Sophia, and I'm sure Vic's going to have a part in it, and obviously Francis, because now we've been eliminating players and Salvatore Moroni is gone, and I'm interested in this Julian Rush guy. We'll see what his role is in the finale as well. But guys, that's episode 7. It was a bit of a shorter one as we head into the finale of The Penguin. But yeah, I mean, I'm just as excited as you guys are to see what happens here in this finale. Now, interestingly, I mentioned before we wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the big Batman-sized question that's going on here. Will Batman show up in the finale? And, I said before in maybe previous episodes when I was doing expectations for the Penguin, I said probably not. I feel like I gave it something like a 60% chance that he would not show up. So I was leaning more towards no. I'm still leaning more towards no, but I give it something like a 55 no to 45 yes. And the simple reason that my answer has changed more towards yes is because a bomb blew up in the city. And I know that Batman, so far, I feel like it's justifiable that Batman doesn't need to show up here because, it's just sort of crime dealings, and he has much bigger things to worry about. But when a bomb goes off in the middle of the city, or at least, a neighborhood in the city, and I understand that maybe Batman is off doing other things, but feels like it should be on his radar, or at least Commissioner Gordon's radar. So we'll see. If he does show up, I would not expect it to be, I want to be very, very clear. I don't expect him to have 30 minutes of screen time in the finale if he does show up. I mean like a post-credit scene or something like that, where he is walking through the rubble of the bomb and he realizes that it's Penguin or something like that. That's the extent of what I think it would be. But again, I don't think he's going to be in the finale. I think the finale, wherever it leaves off, whether it's Sophia at the top, it could be Oz at the top, who knows? I think anything goes at this point, or maybe both of them struggling still for that top spot in the gang wars. I don't know. But wherever this show leaves off, I think that it will very much lead into the Batman Part 2. I would not be surprised at all if we get a very clear understanding of where these two characters sit and where they might be positioned to be in the Batman Part 2. Whether or not either or both of these characters have big roles to play in the second film, we'll have to see. But guys, that was episode 7 of The Penguin. We are fast approaching the end here. It's been just a crazy ride. I've been so glad to share it with you guys, and I can't wait to see what happens next week. So let me know in the comments, what did you think of episode 7? I'd love to hear your thoughts down there.